everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. It is getting more and more freezing cold here in South Korea, and on such days it might be better to go and watch a movie in the comfort of a warm theater or be cozy in bed watching something on Netflix or other streaming services. Well, just in time for the really cold winter weather, there are many new releases for people to watch. The historical film 1212 The Day has already surpassed 3 million tickets sold in just 10 days. There's also the Seoul Independent Film Festival, which kicked off on Thursday. Netflix's monster horror drama Sweet Home is back with its second season, and another much-anticipated title, Gyeongseong Creature, featuring Park Seo-joon, is to be released in 3 weeks. For more on this, we invite Professor Jason Bechervaise from Kyungdong University, who is also a film critic. Welcome, Professor.
Well, thank you for having me, as always.
And we also have Professor Arirang from Arizona State University. Good to see you, Professor Chung.
Hi, Bo-kyung. Hi, Jason. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Now, Professor Bechervaise, before we get to the details of the Seoul Independent Film Festival, I'd like to ask you about Korean indie films' unique characteristics. What distinguishes South Korean indie films from other countries, and what is the latest trend?
Well, it's an interesting question. I've been following Korean independent films for a long time, about 15 years, and it's been fascinating to watch how they have evolved. I guess there's a few things. One aspect that's always I found really interesting is the sheer volume of them. And I mean that in a really good way. I think every industry enters, difficulties, but I think the independent industry is incredibly productive. Sometimes there are dozens released over the course of a year. Even during the pandemic, there are a number of independent films. And I think that's partly because of the education system and the way they train filmmakers here in Korea. So you've got the universities, and then you've got these kind of postgraduate programs. The Korean Academy of Film Arts is a famous school. Alumni include, of course, Bong Joon-ho, Im Sang-soo, and many others. When Bong Joon-ho was at KAFA, they were making short films, but now they're actually making feature films. So that's one reason why there are a number of films that you see each year. Now, they're often young directors as well. So these young directors, a few years ago, they were born in the 80s. Now we're seeing more filmmakers born in the 1990s. And many of them are incredibly talented. And so these films tend to go to festivals, Busan Film Festival, Jeonju Film Festival, and they're films that tackle the themes of young people, not always, but quite often. And Korea has had high employment among young people, and so these films do deal with some of those issues, among many other problems that these young people face. I think what we're seeing more recently, actually, and I've been to Busan this year, I've been to Jeonju, and I think what directors are doing, because often these films are quite bleak, quite depressing, sometimes actually shot during the winter months. And what we're seeing now is humour kind of infused into the narrative. So they're dealing with quite difficult themes, but actually some of them are quite comical. So we've seen that in films this year, including Heritage, which I think is screened at the Busan Film Festival, it's screening also here in Seoul as well. So that deals with the kind of difficulties faced by young people, but also I think the generational kind of differences as well. So, and the film it's got a really interesting sense of humour. So, Korea has a really vibrant independent sector, but I think it also does illustrate that it's actually really difficult for young filmmakers to kind of make their debuts in the studio system. This is kind of before the streaming era. And so, they're kind of forced to work within the kind of independent sector outside the studio system. Otherwise, if they do make their feature debuts in the commercial sector, then they don't really have much in the way of creative autonomy.
Right, I see. So productivity and films that deal with problems the young people face could be unique characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see. Now, Professor Jung, now to this year's festival. For indie films, what role has the Seoul Independent Film Festival played, and what does this year's slogan, Dear Life, suggest?
Well, the festival actually has quite a bit of history. It was established in 1975, and it's one of the major film festivals that supports indie films and young filmmakers. And their films kind of push back or challenge normative narratives that you often see in mainstream media. And also the festivals try to help these young filmmakers by matching them up with distributors so that they can gain wider release and exposure. And for this year's slogan, Dear Life, it might suggest the impact that good films could leave on a viewer. And so you could think about the ways in which even after you leave the cinema, a movie could really touch you and could become a source of comfort or inspiration on difficult times.
All right, I see, Professor Jung. Now, Jason, as I told you, the 49th SIF, should I say, kicked off already on Thursday, and it's going to run through next Friday. Among a total of 1,300 films that were submitted, was there anything that stood out to you?
Well, I haven't actually been to the festival myself. I would love to get there, but fortunately, I went to Busan, and a lot of the titles that screen at the Busan International Film Festival, otherwise known as BIF, they also screen in SIF. And some films that I recommend include a film called Concerning My Daughter, which is directed by Lee Min-ang. It's a really interesting film, focuses on this relationship between this mother and daughter. And the daughter moves back in with her mother, and she brings her same-sex partner with her. And so it's about I guess the mother coming to terms with her daughter's relationship with this other young woman, and we see it from kind of both different perspectives, which I found quite interesting. So there's that film. There's also Work to Do, which is more of a kind of realist drama. This film focuses on a young man who he works at this kind of shipbuilding company, and they're having to make layoffs because the company has entered a period of difficulty, and so it's up to him to actually make basically kind of a spreadsheet and decide who needs to be laid off. So it's a very difficult decision or difficult task that he embarks on, and we see him as he struggles with that and how it affects him in the relationship with his colleagues, but also him and his wife. So I really like that. That's highly recommended. There's also the two New Currents film. New Currents is a kind of competition section at Busan, and two of the Korean films that screen there are also screening in SIF. That includes That Summer's Light, which is fantastic. It's a film focusing on a high school student, and she's tasked by her teacher to kind of give an account of what she did over the summer. Now that really surprises him, and so he asks her to write another account, I guess a more truthful account. And so we see her kind of recollections of what happened over the summer. Includes she has a relationship with this friend of hers. And so, yeah, that's a really fascinating film. There's also House of the Seasons, which was one of my favorites at Busan. It's a really funny film. It's set in a tofu factory in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, we see the kind of family coming together for a ritual. And so it's a really interesting dynamic because you've got gender kind of roles at play as well, and we see the women, the female characters having to kind of carry out all the tasks, whereas the men are kind of just talking and not really doing very much. And it's a fascinating film, and I just love the humour in it. It's really, really funny. So there's that and many other films actually over the screening during the festival that I highly recommend.
All right, I see. Well, thank you for your recommendations. A lot to look forward to regarding this independent films. All right, now, Professor Jung, now to the movies that hit the theaters. 12/12 The Day, a Korean historical film about a military coup in 1979, is rapidly gaining popularity, surpassing the 3 million audience mark already. For those who might not be familiar with the coup, what was it about?
Yes, so the film was directed by Kim Sung-soo, and it portrays a 9-hour period in 1979. And this was when martial law was declared after the assassination of President Park. And in the film, we see a Defense Security Commander Chun Doo-kwang, who is attempting a military coup, and Hwang Jung-min plays a stellar role as Chun Doo-kwang in the film. And Capital Defense Commander Lee Tae-shin, who is played by Kang Woo-sung, believes that the military should not engage in political action, so he's trying to stop Chun Doo-kwang in the film.
much.
Right, I see. Well, based on, historical facts our Professor Chung told us, this film could have been, difficult to make it fascinating. But apparently it attracted many moviegoers. What aspects do you believe it did?
Well, it's a very good film. I've been very fortunate to see it. And what I liked about it is how it kind of humanizes the period. I don't mean that the characters are portrayed in ways that we necessarily, certainly the Chun Do-won character, that we feel sympathy for. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that we see them making decisions. So if we see films like A Taxi Driver or The Attorney, which focus on a character played by Song Kang-ho who really carries the kind of the emotional arc of the film, and audiences really connect with that. Whereas here, I think it focuses on the decisions these people made. And so I found that really, really fascinating because these people made decisions, for better or for worse, and it really had an effect on history. And I think audiences can identify with that, and as a result, it's actually made a lot of audiences very angry because we see this figure who's trying to exploit a power vacuum, and he's very kind of he's villainous in the film, but conniving. But I think the character played by Hwang Jung-min, I don't think he kind of overkills it, and I think there's this wonderful scene towards the end of the film where he realizes what he's done, and to me it was a very kind of human reaction, and so the character comes across as I guess familiar, human, and that adds resonance to it, and I think it makes people even more angry because ultimately it was decisions that these people made, and it all happened very, very quickly, and it focuses actually on two major characters, on the Chun Do-won character, and it also focuses on this kind of platoon commander, basically the Seoul garrison, so the army that are protecting Seoul, and so that's the Jung Woo-sung character. I mean, he's the one that I think audiences would empathize with. He's the one trying to make the right decisions for the country, and so you have these kind of good and bad characters, and they come up against each other, and you also have all these supporting roles, and so it's a very well-written film. There's a team of 4 writers, including the director, Kim Sung-soo. And so, I mean, it could have done, I was a bit worried there'd be so many characters and it gets really convoluted and confusing. That's not what happens at all. Actually, it's very kind of coherent and easy to understand. But at the same time, it is a very heavy film, and people are getting quite, angry as they watch it. And that's perfectly understandable, given what subsequently happened as a result of this military coup.
I watched the movie myself, and I really liked it, and I totally agreed that maybe the reason for its popularity is because it humanizes and makes us understand the decision process.
Right, absolutely. And the thing is, if you look at a film like Memories of Murder, which is set in the 1980s, again, we know what happens at the end of the film. It's a film that focuses on the killings in Hwasong between 1986 and the early 1990s, and the killer wasn't found until actually more recently. And the thing is, the detectives in that film, they're unable to catch the serial killer. That's not down to decisions they've made necessarily. It's down to the fact that they're ill-equipped. They've not been given the training because they've been trained otherwise. They've been trained not to track down serial killer. And the thing is, in this film, Soul Spring or 12/12 Today, it's decisions they make. They have autonomy. They have agency. And so I think in that sense that's quite different in the way it tackles history. And so it's quite refreshing, and I think that's why it's connecting.
All right, I see your point, Professor. Now, Professor Chung, as we know, the local film industry has been quite sluggish, and there were not many movies that went over the break-even point. Do you expect this one to be one of those?
I actually do. I'm very surprised to see the film gaining more and more attention. I've been reading a lot of social media posts where people are really enjoying the film. And also I saw the social media challenge, which is going viral. A lot of people are measuring or checking their heartbeat rate increasing in particular moments in the film. Like as Jason mentioned, some people get angry in particular moments and they check their heartbeat, and they also upload it on social media. And so I think based on these reviews and all the social media challenge, I expect more and more people to go to the theater and watch the film.
All right. Well, I checked my heartbeat as well. It was like over 130. Well, all right. Well, Professor Jang, now up until now, we have been talking about this 12/12 the day, but another major Korean film, 노량, Deadly Sea, will be released soon. And if I'm correct, this is the last of the film trilogy of Korea's legendary historical figure, Admiral Lee Sun-shin, right? Could you tell us more about the story first?
Yes, the movie is based on the Battle of Noryang from 1598. And like you said, it is Kim Han-min's final installment of the trilogy on the films based on Lee Sun-shin. So 7 years after Japan first invaded Korea, Lee Sun-shin is preparing a battle, the last battle in the Noryang Straits. And so we're going to see how Kim Han-min tackles this last film in the trilogy.
All right, I see. Now, Professor Bechervaise, as I mentioned earlier, this is the last one of trilogy. So I'd like to ask you, how did the previous two films do? And do you believe this last one will be able to help revitalize this local film industry?
It's a good question, especially given the success of 12/12 the day. I mean, hopefully it will generate a lot of momentum so other films can do well. Roaring Current, which is the first film, that still is the most successful Korean film in history. It sold over, what, 17 million tickets.
17 million?
Yeah, 17 million tickets. But the thing is, the success of that film, I think, was somewhat unique. It came in 2014. It came a few months after the Seoul ferry sinking, and there was just a lot of... I mean, the atmosphere during that time was difficult, put it that way, and understandably so. And I think Roaring Currents came at a time when audiences were trying to hook onto something to improve, their morale, and I think that it did so very successfully. And then the subsequent film did pretty well, Hansang. It didn't sell as many tickets, nowhere near, I think around about 7 million tickets. I actually think that the second film is better than Roaring Currents. I don't like Roaring Currents at all, I'll be completely honest with you. It's a bit, I mean, it spends a long time building it all up, and I didn't think it was particularly well made, but I did like the second film much more. It was more interesting. I think Park Seo-joon, big Korean actor in Korea, his role as the famous admiral, I think, was a little bit more nuanced than Chae Min-sik. I love Chae Min-sik, but it's a very kind of powerful performance in the first film. And so I'd be curious to see what happens with this latest installment. Clearly there is interest. I mean, both films have been very well received by local audiences. I expect it to do at least decent business. The question is how far it will go.
All right, well, let's wait and see. Now, Professor Bechervaise, we cannot leave out over-the-top services, movies, and dramas. And so, the apocalyptic horror series Sweet Home has returned with the second season after 3 years. And as far as I remember, the first season was quite nice to me, personally, because it had fantastical elements and also it had horrendous, creatures. What do you expect for this season?
I guess a bit more of the same. I mean, dystopian content right now is what Netflix are throwing all their money at. Obviously, I mean, Squid Game, which is not necessarily dystopian per se, but certainly it deals with some of those themes. Right. But yeah, we've seen it in a lot of the content that they're financing, and we'll see that in this second season. Although I understand it, because it basically focuses on this apartment block, doesn't it? And they're kind of trapped inside and coming up against these monsters. And the way, I haven't seen the second season, which drops today, I think around about now, actually. Right. We see the characters kind of escaping from the apartment. And so, the first season's a lot, I guess there's a lot of, confined spaces, whereas the second season, the next logical step is to kind of, I guess, take the characters out and explore explore them in different kind of surroundings and circumstances. So I'm curious to see how it does. It was the first Korean series to feature in Netflix's top 10. So this is the kind of content that has done well. I mean, genre-driven content, be it movies or dramas, is a big draw internationally. We've seen that in the movies, actually, in the early 2000s with films by Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho, Kim Ji-yoon, these kind of genre masters, and Netflix, I think, understood early on that that's the kind of content that would attract viewers, and that's exactly what's happened with the success of Squid Game, of course, and also Sweet Home and Kingdom, and Other series have also done well. The Extraordinary Attorney Woo, for example, which is obviously quite different. But I think by and large, Netflix, the kind of content they're really interested in when it comes to Korea is this genre-driven dystopian fare, and this very much fits that bill.
All right, well, I hope it's good because I'm going to watch it today. All right, well, Professor Jung, another anticipated horror thriller is Gyeongseong Creature, starring Park Seo-joon and Han So-hee. It will be split into 2 parts, the first 7 released on December 22nd and the rest out in January. Do you have any high hopes?
Oh, yes, definitely. As the title already tells us, Gyeongseong, which is the old term for Seoul, it's going to be set in colonial Korea, and it seems that Han So-hee and Park Seo-joon will fight some kind of mysterious, strange creature. And who doesn't love, horror, thriller, colonial history, and Park Seo-joon and Han So-hee? So yes, in addition to binge watching Sweet Home Season 2, and also very much looking forward to Gyeongseong Creature.
All right, I see. A lot to look forward to. All right, well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Jung, and thank you, Professor Bechervaise, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Monday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend, and goodbye.